Conmigo aquí en el estudio, le agradezco mucho, Francois Perrault, economista en jefe global de Scotiabank. Thank you very much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Please tell me, how do you see the landscape, the economic landscape? Because we have seen two different things. In the one side, the U.S. economy is growing faster, 3%. Today they adjust that. Mexico is growing in terms of the expectation, the forecast for 2017. But at the same time, we're seeing kind of difficult stuff in terms of the NAFTA renegotiation.
We're actually quite optimistic, both on the Mexican side and on the North American side, actually. U.S. GDP was up 3%. It was revised up. That's good news. It's historical, so it's backward looking. But the reality is that as we look at the U.S. economy, things seem to be doing pretty well. Employment growth is strong. The business side is doing well. The same thing is happening more or less on the Mexican side as well, as we see it. Employment growth is very, very strong. Wages are picking up. The service activity is very, very strong. There are parts of the Mexican economy that aren't doing very well, linked to infrastructure and oil and gas, but we think that's temporary. So as we look into 2017 and beyond, we think there's a fair amount of momentum in Mexico, more momentum in Mexico actually than there is in the United States. So we're quite optimistic on Mexico.
Le pregunto a Jean-François que cómo ve los datos, sobre todo porque hubo una actualización del PIB, ya le contaba en el resumen, de 3% de los Estados Unidos. Me dice que ellos son optimistas, de hecho esta actualización pues es un ritmo de crecimiento bastante fuerte, tienen buenos datos con respecto al empleo en la Unión Americana, también del lado de los negocios son datos positivos los que se están observando, y por otro lado con respecto a México todavía son más optimistas porque hay buenos datos, partes de la economía que están creciendo bien, coyunturalmente el tema de oil and gas o del sector de los hidrocarburos, parte importante de la reforma energética y por supuesto también la infraestructura, y me dice Jean-François que incluso México tiene más momentum que los Estados Unidos. What is the impact that it could have in terms of if the three countries fail in agreeing in the renegotiation of NAFTA?
Well, it's not a good impact. Clearly, NAFTA is very, very important to all three countries, Mexico, Canada, and the United States. I think if NAFTA were to fail, you'd have a negative impact in the United States, for sure, a negative impact in Canada and Mexico. But it's that negative impact in the United States that, to us, suggests that there is very, very little incentive for the United States to create the conditions in which NAFTA ceases to exist.
Le pregunto que cuál sería el impacto en caso de que México, Canadá y Estados Unidos fallen en llegar a un acuerdo en la renegociación del TLC, y me dice que el impacto sería negativo para las tres naciones, y que en el caso de Estados Unidos pues tiene pocos incentivos dado este impacto negativo que podría tener. Have you some kind of model in order to calculate what will happen in terms of the GDP impact?
We've looked at a number of scenarios earlier this year when the growth prospects are a little bit different. In a scenario in which basically NAFTA ceases to exist, reduces growth in Mexico, the level of growth in Mexico by about 3/4 of a percentage point using our models. It's possible to achieve far different outcomes depending on how pessimistic one wants to be. But the reality is that even in a world in which for instance, NAFTA ceases to exist, you revert to a world where you basically go to MFN tariffs, and those are still pretty low. So the potential for dramatic trade impacts, because all of a sudden tariffs become very different, is not so much there. Rather, it's maybe the investment decisions that occur, whether there's a shock to confidence that makes things a little bit more complicated, and of course the exchange rate impact.
Le pregunto a Jean-François si han calculado cuál podría ser el impacto del fin, el cese del TLC, y me dice que sí, a inicios de año lo hicieron, y ellos han visto que el impacto negativo hacia México sería de 3/4 de punto porcentual, estamos hablando de 0.75%, y eso, bueno, pues sería lo que están viendo, pero no necesariamente algo que sea muy probable, porque depende qué tan dramático se ponga uno en el escenario, dado que todavía nos podríamos mover sobre las tarifas de la Organización Mundial del Comercio, que no es un impacto tan negativo. Now, what about fragility? Because we have seen these big, strong numbers in the United States, even in Mexico, but there is a lot of volatility in terms of many different geopolitical issues, like the North Korean, etc., which is different from other times when we saw worse numbers but less volatility or fragility in terms of the economic landscape.
Yeah, from our perspective, the big risk to the global outlook is more geopolitical in nature. It's you know, a war in North Korea, although we don't really think that's likely. But there is a lot going on the geopolitical side that has the potential, in our mind, to have a reasonably significant impact on financial markets and on global growth. In terms of economic shocks, though, we very much think that for basically the first year in a number of years where it's less a concern about the potential negative economic shocks and rather these kind of geopolitical shocks that cloud the outlook a little bit more than usual. So that's unusual.
Le planteo a Jean-François que por un lado tenemos cifras fuertes en cuanto a la economía, pero muchos riesgos geopolíticos, y me dice justo que hoy se ven más riesgos geopolíticos que en otras ocasiones, pero no tantos shocks económicos, es decir, esto es atípico en tanto que en otras ocasiones se ven pues la posibilidad de un impacto económico y ahora más bien temas como el de Corea del Norte que ellos lo ven poco probable, pero muchos asuntos que están ocurriendo en el mundo y que sin duda pues ponen esta perspectiva, pero sin duda también datos fuertes. Jean-François, thank you very much for being here. I hope you can come back here in Excelsior Television or maybe in radio. It's very interesting to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Vamos.